Back in Server Manager, if I click on disk 0, which is the operating system drive, if I go down to the volumes here and right click on the C drive, notice that configured data deduplication is not an option. It is simply not possible to dedupe the operating system drive. It won't allow you to configure it. If I select disk 1, which is the second hard drive I've added to this machine, when I right click the E drive, now I have the option to configure data dedupe. Well, I'm going to select that here. By default, after you install data deduplication, it is disabled on all volumes on the server. So selectively, you decide which volumes should have dedupe enabled. When I go to enable that here, I have 3 configuration options. I can use this as a general purpose file server, which we referenced in one of the earlier sections. We also talked about using this to store virtual hard drives. That'd be our VDI infrastructure. And also as a virtualized backup server. Meaning if I back my server up multiple times a day, or even just once a day, not a lot changes on a file server or an application server from one day to the next. So they always have a lot of duplicate data. I'm going to click General Purpose File Server. Some things that you have to understand. Right now it says dedupe files older than 3 days, and at the bottom there is a Set Deduplication Schedule. If I click the Set Dedupe Schedule, well, right now it says Enable Background Optimization, and notice I also have this option to enable Throughput Optimization. When you run the background optimization, this runs at a low priority. One of the concerns if you deduplicate any server is that you not degrade performance of the server. For example, during working hours at 9 a.m., if users are accessing a lot of files on their home drive, my concern is that the server is running all these processes to actually dedupe itself, in turn degrades overall performance of the server, or even just disk performance on the server. End result is it could appear slower to my end users. I don't want that to happen, so background optimization will run this at a low priority as it says here, and if my server gets too busy, it will actually go into a pause state and it will completely stop deduping. When more resources are available, then it will just go back and resume the dedupe process. So that is a great thing to have during working hours, especially during peak hours, which are typically first thing in the morning. You may want to set that. An example of when I may want to use this throughput optimization. Let's say we stop working at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Pretty much everyone's out of the office at that time. Well, I could come here and say that on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So for that, I'm going to deselect Sunday and Saturday. I can say I want to start a throughput optimized dedupe schedule at 5 p.m. Instead, I'm going to say 6 p.m. We said we close at 5 o'clock. Folks may work a little later. So I'm going to set this to start the throughput optimize at 6 p.m. That means this runs at a normal priority and consumes whatever resources is required to maximize performance. This will degrade performance for the end user. If not enough resources exist, it will never go to a pause state. So normally what we do, we set this to run for a certain number of hours. So if I want this to run, say 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., I'll just set the duration to be 12 hours. So this runs at that priority Monday through Friday from 6 p.m. until 6 a.m. It also gives me the option to create a second throughput optimization schedule. Maybe I want to set this one. I'm going to actually full screen that so it's a little bigger. I'm going to set a schedule that runs, we'll say just Saturday and Sunday. Maybe Saturday and Sunday we want this to run for a little longer. We don't have people that work as long. So my previous schedule last ran Friday from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. So I'm going to set this to start at 6 a.m. And I'm going to set this to run for 18 hours. So 6 a.m. Saturday It'll run for 18 hours, and it'll run again starting Sunday at 6 a.m. for another 18 hours. So it allows me to have these two throughput optimization schedules by default. Now, if your file server is not a heavily trafficked file server, maybe you don't use these throughput optimization schedules at all. Maybe you only run background optimization. Completely depends on what our goal is. And this will be volume by volume, server by server. Well, I'm going to click OK for that just to get that to process. The other options I have, if you have certain directories that you do not want to be deduplicated, maybe you have, say, a lot of ISO files in a certain directory, and for whatever reason you simply do not want those deduplicated, I can go to this exclude selected folders. If I add, it allows me to browse the volume. Now, I have nothing on this volume right now. It's an empty volume. But I could go through and select any folder on the volume, and then it would allow me to exclude that from the dedupe process. So that's an option. And I can also set this to exclude file extensions. So if I don't want temp files, while they typically will get deleted on their own, based on file extension, I could specify what should not be deduplicated. Something you cannot see in the interface, but it's something that you would ponder. The background optimization and the throughput optimization schedules we just looked at, comparing those to the number of days we require a file to be aged before we deduplicate it. Something to consider. Let's say you have 100 gigs of data on this file server. A lot of files change every day. You have a lot of spreadsheets, a lot of Word documents, PowerPoints, and these files are constantly edited. A concern is if I were to set this to 1 day, so deduplicate files older than 1 day, that means a file that changes daily would attempt to go through this deduplication process daily. The concern, you may dedupe endlessly, meaning before my server can finish like a background optimization deduplication, more files have actually changed. So my server may never actually finish the dedupe process. So ideally, we want to set this number to be high enough. I'm going to set it back to 3. High enough that we believe files that change on a very frequent basis, we just won't dedupe those files. That's really a waste of resources. Anything older than 3 days or whatever number you believe is appropriate, you will dedupe those files. That's like the best of both worlds. You dedupe nearly your entire server, but files that are accessed very frequently just don't have to go through the dedupe process. This is something that you do want to monitor. Keep in mind that this is volume by volume, so it's not even a server by server setting. You would have to think about this for every volume that you want to enable deduplication on each server that you want to enable this on. I'll select OK for that. At any time, if I want to modify anything related to deduplication, I can go back and look at those properties.